Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Halperin. Welcome to Two Way Tonight, the program so nice they named it twice. Well, really only once. Very grateful to you all for joining this evening. Um, it's another day of a melange of news. I would say no huge headlines, but lots of interesting things. And we have three great guests tonight to talk about them. Adam Mockler of Midas Touch is back with us. We love having him on. Our friend Batya Sargon is here, and someone new, Theresa Payton, former chief information officer under G.W. Bush and a cybersecurity expert. Grateful to all three of them for making time. They will be here before too long. I'll just give you an overview of some of the things that are going on. And I thought of today's news in the following way. It takes a lot to surprise me. Almost nothing can shock me just because I've done this a long time and I've covered, Bill Clinton and COVID and of course Donald Trump. So when stuff happens, sometimes I'll get deluged with texts and calls and emails and say, "Can you believe it? It's so shocking. This is unbelievable." Whatever, and I just like, yeah, I guess. And I'm not jaded about it. It just takes a lot to shock me or even surprise me, as I said. There's some stuff today that's a little bit surprising and some not at all. So just to take through it, Attorney General Bondi said unlikely there'll be a criminal investigation into the use of Signal to talk about the military operation against the Houthis. Not surprising. Uh, Pete Hegseth made a music video in Guam. Not surprising. J.D. Vance went after the Jewish insider on X. Not surprising. Uh, Peter Navarro talked about how the United States would raise $100 billion in auto tariffs. Not surprising that he said it. Two things that did surprise me, at least a little bit. And again, not shocked, but I didn't see these things coming. First of all, President Trump is withdrawing Elise Stefanik's nomination to be the ambassador to the UN. It was surprising that he picked her because you'll recall in the beginning of during the transition, the president kept announcing that he was nominating Republican House members for jobs in the administration, and he was doing this as the already narrow Republican majority in the House was shrinking smaller and smaller. And there was a theory, I've talked about this before, that said, if you're going to have 7-seat majority, you might as well have a 1-seat majority. Because if you have a 7-seat majority, people can dream about voting against you for something. But if you have a 1-seat majority, which they basically have, we can only lose one vote if everybody shows up to vote, then only one person can vote against you, and that's the gentleman from Kentucky. Everybody else has to vote with you. There's no freelancing. There's no negotiating. And so they got down to that margin. And now you've got some special elections in Florida next week. We talked about them this morning on the show. And if Elise Stefanik left the House to assume the job of UN ambassador, then they risk being in the minority. And that's without somebody dying or changing parties, whatever. So he didn't say, "I'm going to hold the job open for her." He said he's going to pick somebody else and she's going to go back into House leadership. They'll probably create a new slot for her. So he keeps a very staunch ally in the House and somebody else gets to be UN ambassador. Didn't see that one coming. The other surprising thing is that Bobby Kennedy announced they're laying off 10,000 people at HHS. It's a lot of people. It's a big department, but it's a lot of people. Again, not shocking and not even that surprising in the sense that we've seen massive layoffs announced or forecast at some of the other departments, but that seems like a lot of people. All right. So we've got a ton of video to show you, and we're going to bring our guests in. As always, we want to get your questions and comments. So if you're interested in being part of the conversation, and great, this morning we had 3 new people on the morning meeting. Please raise your hand, or your electronic hand if you're watching here on Two-Way on this platform. Would love it if you've never raised your hand before to raise your hand tonight and be part of the conversation. If you're watching on X or on YouTube, I'll remind you, you may have forgotten, maybe you don't know because you're new. Our ethos here is peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace to all. No smack in the chat. And I got a hilarious email today from a guy who said, you've turned on MAGA, you hate Trump. I'm not watching your platform anymore because you say there's too many negative things on your show. You're talking too much about the signal thing. And I said, wrong platform for you. Enjoy. Watch the media that just reinforces what you already think. And usually when I have an exchange like that, and I have probably like one of those every 2 weeks, I never hear from the person again. But this guy clearly already missing two-way. Let's be honest. You don't need to advanced degree in psychiatry to know or psychology to know. He said, "Oh, here's why the platform could be better, and this is what I liked about it, but I can't watch it anymore because it's so anti-Trump." And I said again, goodbye. Enjoy your bubble because it's not the right platform for you. So I'll say again, you've heard me say this many times. If you're a regular viewer, if you hear something on this platform you don't agree with, if you're in the red team and you hear something very blue, or you're in the blue team, you hear something very red, rather than say, I'll never watch the platform again, what I recommend is say, thank you, Mark. Let me buy you a small present, maybe a Starbucks coffee, because you're actually allowing me to hear what the other side thinks and not watching, Rachel Maddow or her equivalent on the right, but from a very thoughtful member of this community. I find the members of our community, no matter what their views, extremely thoughtful. So you get to hear a thoughtful person explain what they think on the other side. And so if you're someone who says, I don't understand all this coverage of the signal, use of signal, what about Hillary Clinton's emails and what about Joe Biden and the documents in the garage? That's a point of view, but there's a whole other point of view, including held by many people who love Donald Trump, by the way, including, if you've been listening, many people on this platform who are Trump voters who don't like the fact that Signal was used. And if I were someone who was indignant about the coverage, I'd say, well, that's interesting. There's some thoughtful people who disagree with me, who think this is a legitimate story, even 4 days in. I want to hear from them. I don't agree with them, but I want to hear from them. That's the point of this platform's political conversation. We call them conversations like no other. Please enjoy. And if you leave the platform and you feel obligated to tell me, fine. I only have 400 emails to answer a day. What's 401? But if you leave and you think I'm going to be upset that you left because your position is, I hear too many things on the platform I don't agree with, you don't understand what we're doing here. Okay. Thank you again for joining. This program brought to you by the Bahnsen Group. David Bahnsen, we did a great session with him this morning. I hope you got to see it. Many of you did. The Bahnsen Group does personal wealth management. I recommend them for that, but I also recommend as maybe an intermediate step if you're not ready to move all your wealth, if you have enough personal wealth that needs to be managed, over to them to read David's newsletter, The Dividend Cafe. It's free. I read it every day. You should too. It's an extraordinary document David writes himself that allows you to understand what's going on in the economy. It's up to the minute. It's newsy. It's timely. David's constantly tracking what's going on, the intersection between the economy and policy and politics. And it's a great way to understand what one of the most sophisticated people I know on the political economy and just on classical economics. It's one of the best ways I know to not have to read 42 newspapers, but to understand what's going on. So if you want to subscribe to it, and again, it's free. And I tell you again, I read it every day. It shows up in my inbox. Go to our website, twoway.tv/TBG, the Bahnsen Group, and subscribe. And if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. But I bet you, and I hear so many good things about it from folks in this community who read it. I bet you if you subscribe and you open it, and many of you who subscribe open it regularly, I think you'll love it. I think you'll say, this guy writes about the economy in a way that I can understand, saves me time, don't have to read 42 newspapers, and it gives you insight into what's going on. It is a great product, and I would tell you that even if David were not our sponsor. It is a great product. So I recommend you sign up for that. Again, go to twoway.tv/TBG, the Bahnsen Group, and you can thank me tomorrow. All right, let's bring in our guests. Our guests who are coming in now are regulars, and I love our regulars, I have to say, because if they weren't great, we wouldn't have them on even twice. First, Batya Sargon, incredibly, brought in Adam incorrectly. Sorry about that. Batya, welcome. Can you unmute yourself, or do I need to do that? I probably need to help you do that. Batya unmutes. And now Adam unmutes. Batya, welcome in. Adam, welcome in. Thank you both for joining. I forget, do you two know each other?
No,
No.
I'm very
Not
excited
at all.
about
All
him.
right. Adam, do you know a lot about Batya, or you didn't have time to even Google?
No, fill me in. I didn't know that. I wasn't expecting. Nice to meet
Okay,
you,
all
Vance.
good. All good. You're both very smart, and you don't have the exact same positions on things, which is good for the purposes of conversation. But you both are extremely patriotic Americans who care
Well, I
about the
love to.
country, who do care about the country, and have perspectives on how things should stay the same and change. So, Batya, let's say the three of us were having dinner, and I said, Batya, tell Adam a little bit about yourself. What would you tell him?
The designation I have landed on is I am a MAGA lefty, which makes a lot of sense if you're like a working class person who was voting Democrat your whole life and then voted for Trump, but is harder for people, I think, who are kind of in our business to metabolize, if that makes sense.
So you like
And
populism?
Yeah.
yeah,
I get it.
but Botch is at the Free Press, and I'll tell you, Adam, you surprise me all the time. It's one reason I love having you on. Like sometimes our viewers complain that the conversation's too predictable. The two of you, like sometimes I know what you're going to say, but sometimes I don't, and I love that both about you. And Botch, you know all about Adam. I don't need to tell you a thing about Adam, do I?
Well, I definitely looked him up before because
Yeah,
it was such an intriguing little blurb, and it's just
yeah,
amazing, like to see the younger generation of journalists coming up and building things in new ways, and like the conversation that they're able to have with their viewers. It's really exciting and cool. So I'm very
yeah.
excited to meet you, Adam.
Wait, how come
Uh,
Batya got access to the panel names and I didn't? I didn't know who was going to be on the panel.
I don't know.
I was told to dress up too.
She
You know,
probably asked and you did. No one told you to dress up. That's not
okay,
true. But you
okay.
look you do look good.
Thank you.
I'll tell you, Adam is brilliant and engaged and engaging, but he's also a monster success on YouTube. And anyone in my business, because we're in the YouTube business now at Two Way, just major props. Adam, is that something that makes me seem old if I say major props, or is that something you
No,
might say?
of course,
All
I
right,
know
major
that.
prop. Well, I know you know what it means, but often I'll use expressions like that, and someone will tell me, "Mark, that was an expression in the '90s." But I'm in awe of what Adam and his colleagues have built. It's incredible. If you have never checked out Midas Touch, even if you don't agree with Adam's politics or the politics of the website, I strongly recommend it. Just as a matter of the communication of ideas and the use of video and the sensibility of it. It just even if you're not in the business, if you are in the business for sure, but even if you're not in the business, I recommend you check out Adam's stuff and his colleagues. It's not short of brilliant. It's brilliant. So very grateful to have you both here. Thank you for
Appreciate that.
joining.
Appreciate
All
that.
right, let's run through some stuff together. I'm going to save stuff related to Signal and Doge until Theresa Payton joins us because that's in her wheelhouse, and I want the three of you to talk about that. So let's start with this Elise Stefanik thing. Put up number 3, please. President Trump on Truth Social today said he's withdrawing Elise Stefanik as I said before, as his nominee, and I believe she was confirmed by the full Senate, but hadn't resigned yet to take the seat. She certainly was on the path to confirmation. And he said Elise Stefanik's going to stay in the House and not come to Congress. And he's pretty open about it. And I have no reason to believe his stated explanation isn't the actual explanation, which is they need her in the House because the tight majority makes taking her away a problem. So there's lots of angles to this. There's the inside baseball thing. There's the question of the House margin. And then there's, the trajectory of Elise Stefanik, who's really one of the most powerful women in American politics. And for those of you who don't know, her former press spokesperson was the White House press secretary, who used to work for Elise Stefanik after she worked in the White House in her first tour of duty. So, Adam, what any thoughts on this? Is this significant to you? What meaning, if any, do you attach to it?
I've been really focused on the Signal stuff, so I did do a segment on this, but I really do think his stated explanation is the reason, as you said. I mean, they've got a tight majority. That seems to be the reality. And Elise Stefanik, while I think she's pretty good on foreign policy, I mean, I don't even disagree with her on much. I think she's not unique in any way that he can find someone else without putting their tight
Right.
majority in jeopardy.
Right. Batya.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the UN position is sort of a little bit of a silly. Your job is just to sit there and like raise your hand, right? Like it's not a job that would take advantage of her very manifold and significant talents. She's very, very brilliant. She is great on those oversight committees. People remember that moment when she was interviewing Claudine Gay and the other presidents of these universities. But what she actually did there, how she got the scalps, was really brilliant. She asked them if calling for the genocide of the Jews is against the school policy. And they, of course, had been prepared to say, well, calling for intifada is not calling for genocide, because to these young people, it doesn't mean that. It means liberation or what have you. And they were unable to realize that she had sort of cornered them by asking the question in the more blunt way. She had the brilliance to realize that she should just keep asking that same question again and again and again, which for me as a journalist was like, that's what we're supposed to do. Like when you're interviewing somebody very important and they won't give you an answer, you're not supposed to just move on. You're supposed to scrap the rest of the interview and just be like, please answer this question, or please admit you're not answering it. And that kind of nimble mind, like that's very rare, I feel, right now, especially members of Congress. And so she, I think, would have been totally wasted at the UN. So I'm kind of happy to see this. I just don't see how that was a good fit for her, given her talents. It's not an important job. So I think this is good news.
Okay, interesting.
Is it the MAGA part of you that's pro-Israel, not the lefty part? You call yourself a MAGA lefty?
I'm sorry?
I think it's, well, I don't want to speak for Batya, but I think it's independent of both of those. But he's asking where from whence comes your fervent support?
You said you're a MAGA
Israel?
lefty. I said I'm assuming the pro-Israel comes from the MAGA portion of it rather than the lefty portion of it.
In America, like it's a very populist issue to be pro-Israel. Most Americans, especially most Americans who don't have a college degree, are very pro-Israel. The number one predictor of whether somebody supports more the Palestinians than Israel is whether they have a college degree. So as a populist, it's very consistent. I also happen to be obviously Jewish and feel strongly.
No, yeah, I'm pro-Israel as well. I just feel like the new era of populism that I see, people tend to be just anti-war at all, very isolationist. Maybe that's a more online thing that I experience, but I've seen people on the far left and the far right. But that's besides the point.
All right, so good segue into the next thing I want to talk about, which is going to be number 5, J.D. Vance. So J.D. Vance is a source of a lot of affection and appreciation for a lot of people in the Republican Party, at least. But he's also a source of great controversy, and we heard that on this platform. Some people think he's too dovish, and some people think he's too anti-Europe. So he tweeted this morning, and this is consistent with his normal Twitter game, which is he's very aggressive and writes things that you can't believe the Vice President of the United States is writing. This morning, Josh Kraushaar, who's a very experienced reporter who now is at the Jewish Insider, wrote a hit piece against me in the Jewish Insider, which has become an anti-JD rag. I love the fact that he refers to himself by his initials. It has many problems, including 7 anonymous quotes from cowardly Republicans. But the most glaring factual error is the below. So he just points out that there's a factual error in the story. So, Batya, you first. How would you characterize? So here's a quote from the piece. Well, actually, that's all right. This quote doesn't really go to the heart of what he was upset about. But how would you characterize J.D. Vance's posture towards Israel specifically, and more generally in foreign policy? Like, what school of foreign policy do you think he's from?
I think he is very dovish. It's my understanding of him that he is very pro-Israel. He wrote a white paper about why support for Israel and support for Ukraine are not actually comparable at all. Kind of like the argument I was making, like that it's a very populist, America first thing to be pro-Israel, whereas Ukraine does not really fall into that category. So to me, until this happened, I would have said he's exactly like President Trump. He's not an isolationist. President Trump is not an isolationist at all. There are a lot of conflicts he's willing to engage in, but the view that Marco Rubio laid out for the Trump 2.0 foreign policy is that every single encounter, every single foreign policy decision will be determined based on 3 questions. Does it make America stronger? Does it make America safer? Does it make America more prosperous? So that's like neither isolationist nor not. It says we want peace through strength, and we're not going to be like worried about pursuing it. What stood out to me in this whole episode vis-a-vis JD Vance was not the dovishness. It was what seems to me like a kind of cowardly undermining of President Trump's decision in this group chat. And then when he was invited by Hegseth to go back to President Trump and raise his questions with Trump, he declined and then sort of, backed off. And that was the thing that stood out to me. And honestly, Mark, Dan brought this up the first time you all discussed this on 2 in the morning meeting. And he said, Trump is not going to be mad at Mike Walls. Mike Walls made a mistake. Trump only cares about disloyalty. And I wonder if the only person I've not heard Trump defend since this happened is JD Vance. And I wonder if this, Vance saying, the actual quote is, I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. So to me, I love the dovishness. I love the debate. I love the idea of let's always ask 6 million questions before engaging in war. This is an anti-war president. What I did not appreciate was this kind of undermining in the group chat. And then Hegseth's response to him is really interesting. He says, I welcome you bringing this up with the president, with POTUS. And at that point, JD Vance backed off. So that was really what stood out to me. And I haven't seen that discussed a lot.
Yeah, it's a great point. I actually had the same reaction, but I agree it hadn't really been discussed. Adam, what do you think of JD Vance's foreign policy inclinations?
Well, there are a few things that Batya said there. I agree that Israel and Ukraine they aren't really comparable regarding our support, but I do think Ukraine is just as important as Israel on the global stage. With the things you laid out, stronger, safer, more prosperous, the U.S. does become all three of those things with support of Ukraine. So I do find it weird that JD Vance is pushing Europe away so much. Like in that group chat, it seems like he has genuine disdain for Europe. And that's not the type of isolationism that I like to see. I don't know. This may simplify it, but I feel like we're kind of losing a lot of the lessons that we learned from World War II, like the utility of alliances, having deterrence from Russia and other authoritarian regimes. And now we're withdrawing from the world stage. And this is what seems like JD Vance's opinion of what we should do with Europe, maybe not Israel, but we're withdrawing from the world stage to a degree where, I don't know, we just don't seem to be a reliable ally anymore. And
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, sorry, what were we going to say? It seems like that's what you guys want, or what were we going to say, Mark?
I find myself constantly defending Vance and Trump to some extent on Europe. I really don't think they have disdain for Europe or a desire to push them away. I think they believe that militarily, economically, culturally, socially, diplomatically, that Europe is not only not pulling its own weight, but is endangering itself by not changing in a way that they think is vital to be part of the modern world and a coalition with the United States. So it's tough love. And I know how much many Europeans are offended by it. But if you look at the substance of what they're saying and just the logic of it, they don't want to be at war with Europe. They don't want a weak Europe. They want a strong Europe. But their conception of Europe now is Europe is weak. And I have to tell you, having been here for a couple of weeks, you see it everywhere. Economically, culturally, socially, militarily, diplomatically, they're just not where they need to be. And I think the view of Vance and Trump is, guys, get with the program here, modernize, reform, put your house in order in a way that will allow you to be doing more of defending yourself and being a coalition partner with the United States, where we're not your nuclear and military and economic umbrella.
Yeah, I agree that Europe needs to pay its fair share, but I feel like JD Vance in the group chat, I can't remember his exact wording, I should have it pulled up, but it seemed like they had some genuine hatred for Europe in there. I think they were like, I hate bailing Europe out. I don't want to. So it seems like they want to withdraw us more so than just making Europe pay their fair share. I understand if Europe should pay, first it was like 2%, now 5% of their GDP. European countries need to pay that. I agree with that. But I just feel like the way they talk to Zelensky, and a lot of Trump supporters, a lot of Trump voters, I want to see what Batya thinks. Batya, do you think we should withdraw from our alliance with Europe broadly, or do you think it's mutually beneficial?
So I actually think you're right and Mark's wrong. I think you're reading JD's tone correctly. I think it's so funny because this episode really drew out like a bizarrely, like the distinction between Vance and Trump makes Trump actually look a lot more mature in his approach to Europe. Because Mark, I think you're right about Trump. Like he is bringing this kind of like almost like a coach, you know what I mean? Like this tough love approach. But that those texts, I read them the way Adam did. Like I felt this kind of contempt and a kind of immaturity. And it actually honestly made me rethink myself because like, yeah, I would have said before, like, I just don't get what we're getting out of this anymore. I think a lot of Americans who don't have a college degree, who don't work in the knowledge industry, feel keenly the contempt of organizations, you know, European organizations, this kind of like globalist agenda that they feel has sort of screwed them over for a really long time, both relying on us economically and so taking advantage of us and sneering at us. And so there is this feeling of like, what are we already getting out of it? But I think like now looking back in hindsight and comparing the way Trump has welcomed these leaders into the Oval Office, the way he has spoken to them with the contempt that J.D. Vance kind of unleashed in those texts, it is making me have a moment where I'm like, you know, which side of this am I on? And I think the Trump approach actually is correct. And it is sort of much more feeling. And even the way, the difference between how JD and Trump spoke to Zelensky, like it really did. There was like a very different emotional tenor to it. I think we're going to start seeing coming out, like this daylight is opening between them on foreign policy.
All right, let's welcome in Theresa. Payton. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Grateful to you. So this is a short history of America. There was a period where the most important thing you could be, the most en vogue thing you could be was an influencer. And then it switched to member of Mar-a-Lago. And now it's cybersecurity expert. That's like the coolest thing you can be. And that's what Ms. Payton is. Thank you for being here. You worked in the Bush 43 administration, right? As Chief Information Officer. Who was your boss when you were Chief Information Officer? Who you worked for?
About 25 different people considered themselves working on the first priority of the president, including the president. So
right. Okay.
Lots of bosses, but that's okay.
And are you in the private sector now?
Yes. So I have a company, Fortalice Solutions, and we do cybersecurity support and intelligence operations for individuals as well as companies and the U.S. government.
Do you have a political orientation we should know about that you want to share?
I'm definitely a conservative. I've come from a long line of U.S. military. It's actually how my great-grandparents became U.S. citizens. So I'm a big fan of our men and women in uniform, as well as law enforcement. That's kind of the family business, military and law enforcement. I'm pro small government, big constitution, and big and bold ideas.
So are you MAGA?
Probably more MAGA than not. It depends on the issue. And I think that's what makes MAGA great is you can, say, hey, on this list of 10 things, I'm all in on these 4 and these other ones. I have a difference of opinion and let's have a tall pole, big tent on these issues.
Awesome. Who's your favorite Trump cabinet member and why?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough one. I've long been talking about the health issues in this country of the chemicals in our food. So I just love what RFK Jr. Is working on there. So he's a favorite in that regard. I feel like I've been seen and heard on some of our problems with our healthcare and our food supply. So as a mother of 3, that's really important to me.
How old are your kids?
So I have college, high school. Just graduated from college, and high school.
Awesome. Again, if you want to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. All right. So, Ms. Payton, kick us off talking about Signal. Put up number 2, please. So there's lots of people going to court now. The same federal judge who's overseeing some of the other Trump cases, the chief judge in the district, is now ordering everyone to keep track of their messages who was involved in this to make sure that nothing gets disappeared. No other huge developments on this today, except, as I mentioned earlier, the Attorney General said she didn't foresee a criminal probe into what occurred, even though you can bet that if the Attorney General were the opposite party of someone who did something like this, not in the executive branch, but say in Congress, with classified information or sensitive information, I should say, you can take that down. there might be a criminal probe under other circumstances, but I don't think anybody's surprised there's not. So let's do everybody's current take on where things stand. And Theresa, start with you. And I'll start with the question, and then I just love your general view. From your point of view, is using Signal appropriate for sensitive conversations, substantive conversations?
Signal has no place in classified conversations. I know the Pentagon has said that these weren't classified conversations based on what's been recently revealed. It's incredibly sensitive. I would, before everybody kind of judges Signal being used for unclassified, I think there's sort of this gray area of sensitive information. So they call it sensitive but unclassified. And Signal is a better option than just plain texting, but it has no place if something is marked classified. We should not be using it as of right now, the way it's been implemented.
Okay, let me ask you this. If I were White House Chief of Staff and I came in for Donald Trump and I came in and somebody said the Biden administration made it okay, not so okay to use Signal for non-sensitive conversations, that it's actually installed on devices, on computers and on phones. I'd say to my chief information officer or chief technology officer, I'd say, can't we develop something that's like more secure? Because you could foresee this happening, maybe not to the degree that the Secretary of Defense did, but if you're JD Vance at a softball game with your kids or at the supermarket and there's something going on, you're not going to say, drive me to a skiff. You're going to say, get on my phone and message back. And that slippery slope seems so obvious. So why doesn't the government have something more secure enough for sensitive conversations that JD Vance can have on his phone? Why not?
Why not? That is exactly right. I am absolutely appalled. It's 2025, right?
Yeah.
We're sending civilians into outer space. We've got a civilian bringing astronauts, stranded in space back home. It's 2025, and you still have to go to a windowless room to go to the high side to look at classified comms. That's wrong. Obviously, we had a little bit of a dark ages period happening for the last 4 years. We have leaders of this country who deserve to have elegant, seamless, secure, classified comms that they can access from anywhere. And the
Right.
fact that we don't have that in 2025, I think is a real disservice to this country. But the fact remains is that Signal, which I use every day, is a great encrypted app to use for non-classified communications. So there's this gray area right now where you have people saying it wasn't classified comms. You have some people trying to make that decision. I will tell you, like, I've had a clearance for a long time. Not everybody that has a clearance gets to make the call on what's classified and what its designation is. You have to have a special training for that.
Right. One more for you, and then I want to hear Adam and then Batya, your kind of overall view of where we are in the Signal thing. What's something about how this has been discussed or reported that you with your expertise say, people don't have this quite right?
Well, I mean, I think both things can be true here. We still don't know why Jeffrey Goldberg, who was a biased journalist, whose wife worked for the Hillary Clinton campaign, we still don't know how he got into this group chat. So, in my humble opinion, if he believes he observed classified information, there was a different way of going about reporting it instead of creating sort of cliques and histrionics. The other thing, though, is Waltz and Company, they have got to tighten up their comms. Their OPSEC allowing somebody who shouldn't have been observing that chat on Signal is not good. And so even at the highest levels, it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to ask for refresher training on what are our proper protocols. When do I use Signal? When do I not? And somebody's got to be doing trust but verify at these group chats.
The other issue, which is insane to me, not surprising, is the departments and the White House all have their own policies. There's no consistent federal executive branch policy on all this stuff. Noah, is the Brett Baer interview still going on, or is it over?
I think it's gone to commercial. I think it's over.
All right. So Brett Baer and I interviewed Musk and a bunch of the DOGE people, and maybe we'll bring you a clip of that in a second. Thank you for that. Adam.
No, he's back. There's more.
Yeah. All right. Let's touch into it. Let's just dip in and get a feel for Brett's interview with Team DOGE.
And let's go to Fox.
He's very supportive of DOGE. It's been wonderful to work with him.
Is the battle between government of decades of buildup and business, which you guys are, is that like a train hitting each other? I mean, it seems like it's pretty disruptive.
Well, this is a revolution, and I think it might be the biggest revolution in government since the original revolution. But at the end of the day, America is going to be in much better shape. America will be solvent. The critical programs that people depend upon will work, and it's going to be a fantastic future. But are we going to get a lot of complaints along the way? Absolutely. You know, one of the things I learned at PayPal was you know who complains the loudest and with the most amount of fake righteous indignation? The fraudsters. It's a tell. There's some of these NGOs that are crazy, like the $2 billion to Stacey Abrams' NGO that basically didn't exist and suddenly gets $2 billion awarded from the federal government. She has, why? And there are many such cases like that.
I think that most people, common sense-wise, would say the fraud's got to end.
Yeah.
They're concerned about the 94-year-old mother who skips a check or somehow doesn't get what she's supposed to get.
Right. And what we're trying to say is actually that the 94-year-old grandmother is actually, as a result of DOGE's work, going to get her check. She's not going to be robbed by fraudsters like she's getting robbed today. And the solvency of the federal government will ensure that she continues to receive the Social Security checks, that Medicare continues to work, without which we're all doomed. The reason we're doing this is because if we don't do it, America's going to go insolvent. We're going to go bankrupt. And nobody's going to get anything.
Why are you guys all doing it? I mean, you can pipe up, but you don't have to be here, right? I mean, you don't have to be doing this.
I have blessed with 4 beautiful children, my wife and I. But we have a real fiscal crisis. And this is not sustainable. And what's worse, back to my children and everyone else's children, is we are burdening them with that debt. And it's only going to grow.
Steve, there's not a lot of hierarchy here. You guys are kind of all approaching it in different, silos, but with the same kind of goal, right? I mean, this is really Silicon Valley.
All right. We dump at it.
colliding.
We're all gonna have to watch. We're all gonna have to watch the whole thing, basically, because it looks very compelling. Adam, love your just general overview sense now of where we are on the Signal story. What's interesting you? What's concerning you about where we are?
Yeah, there are a few different distinctions that I want to make. First of all, I think there are a few scandals, or quote-unquote scandals, that people should be held accountable for. First of all, the Signal leak seemed to be a massive lapse of security, as Ms. Theresa Payton said, but also the fact that it seems like most officials in the Trump admin lied about it the next day. Some of them even under oath claimed this wasn't classified material, which also seems to be something that people should be held accountable for. But also, I'm also not a security expert, but from everything that I've read, from people I've talked to, you can use Signal to coordinate meetings, to plan surface level stuff. But then when you're talking about a strike 31 minutes before you even launch the missiles, and you have a random person who's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic in it, that's a huge lapse as well. So yeah, I think it speaks to a broader, I think liberals are having a good week because we've been taking a lot of losses over the past few months. And now finally where we're like, dude, we told you that if you pick people who are loyal to you over people who actually have experience, if you pluck people off Fox News, eventually you're going to get burned and the experience just won't be there. And I'm not saying this is what it was. It could have been Waltz's fault over Hegseth's, but yeah, I just feel like it's a pretty big win for liberals, but terrible loss for the country.
Can I ask Adam a question? Adam,
Yeah.
how big of a story is this, do you think, in your circles, for your audience, does this matter? Are they upset about this? Are they following this? Or is it your sense that younger people are just they don't really care about this as much as people in the punditry class?
No, it's been a pretty big story. There's been a lot of memes about it. I've been posting a lot of memes and they do really well about this, but there's been a lot of serious commentary as well. It seems like it was, there are reports that there could have been military personnel put at risk if this had gone slightly differently. Imagine if he had accidentally added a different journalist like Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson forwards it to a slightly Russia-aligned friend. We would not be okay right now. But someone was saying on the news earlier, who was it, that I think it was Representative Bacon that Russia probably saw these messages at some point. I don't know.
That's a good question. I want to ask you, Theresa Payton. It is asserted that some combination of the Russians, the Chinese, maybe others, are seeing the phone activity of our cabinet members in real time. Is that definitely true? Definitely not true? Maybe true.
Maybe true. We did have testimony by the outgoing Biden administration that 8 to 9 US telecommunications companies, as well as international, had been invaded by the PRC, People Republics of China Assault Typhoon. China, for the record, denies it, so I have to, kind of give that disclaimer. But basically saying that it was a very intrusive invasion into our telecommunications, that people were targeted. In some cases, they could see text messages, phone contacts, phone records. Now, we never got an update saying they're out now, we're all clear. The telco company's been working on it. The outgoing administration said it was going to be very complex. So text messaging in and of itself, for all of us, not just the administration, is incredibly insecure right now. Signal is a better thing to do than just plain texting for unclassified. But here's the thing. If you store your Signal chats on your laptop, on your desktop, they could, if those devices are compromised and you're storing those chats there, they could potentially be at risk.
Right. All right. Great conversation. I want to talk about DOGE, but I'm also mindful of the time. So I'm going to bring people in. As always, tell us where you are, if you would, unless you're in the witness relocation program and you don't want to, and what's on your mind for this great group. And we'll start with either Kelly. Welcome in, Kelly Jordan. Thanks for joining.
Hi. Oh, thank you. Hi, Mark. I've been watching for a while, but this is my first time calling in.
Thank you for doing that.
And it's in response. There's been a few things I've wanted to call in, but it was actually in response to your guest comments on JD Vance. So I was thinking about it, and I watched his Munich speech. I guess my question to them would be: they're our allies, right? But why are they our allies? Because we have joint values, right? JD Vance talks about the First Amendment. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I didn't expect to be
That's
nervous.
okay. No reason to be nervous. Everyone, with the possible exception of Batya here, is very friendly.
Okay. So I guess my question, when I watched JD Vance's speech, and I agree with your take, Mark, and then I heard the guest, who I actually have a lot of respect for, kind of poo-pooing, oh, I felt like they were acting in a way similar to the way the Europeans act. And JD Vance he's saying hey, if we're going to defend you and protect you, let's at least make sure we have these values in common.
Yeah. Kelly, I couldn't agree more, and no reason for you to be nervous. That was well said. Batya, you first, and you are very friendly. I was just kidding. Just, do you want to revise and extend? Because Kelly and I think JD Vance is trying to help Europe, not divide us.
I think that we're in a moment of reevaluating what our interests are. They really expanded and expanded and expanded under successive Democratic leadership. And I think there was this view that, we have just endless resources. We're the richest country on earth. We should be able to share our resources with anybody who needs anything. And that sort of in the last administration included, basically decriminalizing illegal border crossing. So we had this open border and the kind of free flow of goods and of labor and then of American taxpayer dollars into all of these other countries and into programs like NATO, which we're just not under threat from Russia. I mean, the idea that Russia would wage war on us to me, seems just ridiculous. So we're basically doing that to help somebody else. Now, I think what we're doing right now is we're in a moment of retrenchment to where that largesse came very much at the expense of our less fortunate neighbors of the American working class, who were asked to bear the burden of the world's problems. And instead of getting anything in exchange for it, they got contempt from American elites, from the international community, and basically, this sort of downward mobility of the American working class. And so we're now in this moment of reevaluating, to me, it seems like there's something godless about, offering to help so many other people when your own neighbors can't afford the American dream. And, people will say, well, they can afford a lot more than, that child in Zambia who was benefiting from this or that program. It's like, sure. But that's not the standard. It's, can they afford the same amount as the people setting the policy for America, the person hiring them to be their cleaning lady? Like, so to me, there's like this reevaluation is very much about like a kind of fairness, kind of like that we've lost this sense that we owe something to our fellow Americans because we had this largesse. And I think that's what Trump is reevaluating with this kind of three-pronged approach to foreign policy. And I agree with you. Like, I wonder how far it will go. But the idea that, like, I think the First Amendment is a really good example. Like what JD, I think, was trying to point out is like, actually, is that even a value that we share with Europe anymore?
Yeah.
They seem very interested in it. Great comment, Kelly. Thank you so much for coming on.
Adam or Theresa, do you guys want to comment?
I mean, I guess I really quickly just want to say I'm on the left, and I think I'm a liberal. I think a lot of Trump voters overestimate how much other countries are taking advantage of us. Yes, Europe should pitch in more. Absolutely, for sure. But I feel like every time I speak to a Trump voter, they think every other country is screwing the US over when we're not. And JD Vance seems to be slightly more hostile towards Europe and European countries than Trump does. And maybe it's just because we got to see his inside text messages. But yeah, I don't know. It just kind of reminds. Yeah, what's up?
Can I just challenge you on one thing? More hostile. I guess I would say, so there's the expectation that you're in NATO, you're a partner, you're going to commit X amount of funds, blah, blah, blah. Is he being more hostile, or is he holding them to account, which is something maybe we haven't been seeing from both parties for decades?
I think it's a thin line. I think what Trump is doing is holding them to account, but he's kind of doing it in an abrasive way, right? The way they treated Zelensky in the Oval Office, and you can have the argument about Zelensky's clothing or whatever, but I do think they were ganging up on Zelensky. And not to sidestep your question, but it reminds me of this Zelensky line that he said when he was like, he said something to the effect of, Russia, there's an ocean separating you, but Russia still affects you. This war still affects you. And it reminded me of what Batya just said when she said Russia would never wage war on the US. And I think they absolutely would. Not like maybe a ground war, but in many different ways, Russia's trying to destabilize the US with disinformation. And yeah, what's up, Kelly?
Oh, no, I was going to say, I appreciate your opinion. I guess I would just say, I feel like there's this constant back and forth. Like, we can't have it both ways. Russia can't be such a threat that, we need to, such a threat that they're coming after America and blah, blah, blah. But then they also can't even beat Ukraine, right? Like, I guess my point was, I don't want to take up too much time or get sidetracked, but my point was, like, I feel like JD Vance is sticking up for that in a blunt way. And I don't know, maybe he's the bad cop to Trump's good cop, which, interesting take there. But I would just say I really appreciated JD Vance. JD Vance is just his kind of directness. And like what Batya was saying, yes, I feel like Americans, our neighbors, have struggled as a consequence to these major international events that really are driven often by the elite that, they're not hitting everyday Americans. When you can't go to the store, I work in a school. There's kids that can't read. I mean, we have some real problems here. And I guess I would just wrap it up by saying, I appreciate the way JD Vance and Donald Trump, but are sticking up for, the Americans here. And I just,
Kelly,
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of Two Way and for coming on tonight. You did
All
great.
Bye.
Theresa, anything you want to say about JD Vance in Europe?
No, I mean, I loved all the commentary here. And, I would just say, I agree with what Kelly was saying, which is we have had a time period where, maybe we were funding different things and not receiving the appreciation back for what we were doing. And at the end of the day, we are in an enormous amount of trouble with the debt load that we're carrying. So my undergraduate degree is in economics. And so I'm increasingly concerned about the debt and the deficit. And so we do have to ask the rest of the world to step up and pay their fair share. And we have to get our financials in order. I mean, this is sort of like if you think about a family that you're trying to figure out what are we going to do with our finances because we're spending more than we're bringing in, and everybody sits at the table and says, well, we need to give money to my friends and I need to keep my cell phone bill and my internet bill. Like we just haven't made the tough decisions. So it's good to see us sort of apply common sense, and we do need all of our allies. But we do need to also stand up for ourselves and stick up for ourselves and get our financials in order.
Thank you for that. Paul, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Mark. I'm a huge fan. I've been watching you since you started breaking the Biden story last summer. And I'm in North Carolina, but I've been all over. I grew up in California. I'm very MAGA, but grew up a Bush Republican, and I'm 41 now. But Adam reminds me of a lot of my friends in California. So I've always grown up. Two-way was my life, being in California, being a conservative in California. There's so much going on, and I'm going to try to keep it pointed. But on the signal stuff, I just wanted to say that even on MAGA, I can admit that it's egregious what happened. It's insane. I think there is some very interesting coincidences that it just happened to be Jeffrey Goldberg that ended up in there. That's pretty interesting to me. I think there's going to be more of the story coming out over time. I don't know which way it's going to go. But I also want to say that one of the things that keeps coming out is the kind of like, how can anybody with a brain not see the big deal on this? And that just seems to be a talking point I keep hearing, even from journalists, not everybody just on the left. And I hear some
I said that exact thing this morning. I don't think it's a disputable point. What they did was not right.
No, exactly. But what I wanted to say on that is that I think there's an intellectual argument to be made that, you know, when you trust people, they're on your side, you're just going to be more forgiving. The left has obviously done it a million times. We watched it during the whole Biden administration. So many stories that should have been big weren't because the media is on their side. And
sorry to interrupt. Not just the Biden administration. We've watched it for 50 years.
Oh, 100%. I was just talking more recently.
No, I know. You know. I just want to emphasize that I've heard from people this week who said what they did was stupid and arrogant. And I will not criticize them publicly because I'm still so outraged at what the Democrats did for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Like that cut and dried.
Like for me, I can admit that it's egregious, everything that happened, and I don't want to see any of them fired or anything unless it gets worse. And like what Adam said, where he just said that Trump picked loyalists versus people who are that have merit to do these jobs. I think that's kind of a ridiculous comment considering what we just saw the last 4 years. But here's my question, because I want to get away from that. I had a comment. I wanted to ask Batya, because I love Batya. Batya, what you did, that tariffs answer you had on Bill Maher the other week, unbelievable. You stunned him, and it was great. I wanted to ask you, Batya, because you say you're a leftist MAGA. I wanted to ask you what brought you over to kind of where now people would consider you far right. And the reason I'm asking is because as a Bush Republican growing up, I now disavow like the war of the neocon structure, all that, and which is funny seeing it now on the left. And I feel like I've grown more centered since the Bush years, since even the Clinton years. And now we're all far right. And so I just wanted to hear kind of your story on that real quick, or the quick version.
Thank you, Paul. Great question. Batya.
Thank you so much for the question, Paul. I'm going to give like one of the things, because obviously I had Trump derangement syndrome in 2015 and 2016. So it's obviously been a real journey. You know, it's like a lot of things, like there were like initial cracks, but I'll tell you the first thing I remember as like an initial crack in what made me go from being like a woke, liberal, anti-Trump person, so there was a study that came out from Yale in 2018. And I remember where I was sitting in my office when I first read it, because it like just shook me to my core. And the study found that there was a difference between how white liberals and white conservatives talk to people of color. So I see this headline and I'm like thinking to myself, you know, like, oh yeah, let's see. I bet they're really racist, those conservatives, you know? So I start scrolling, you know, I'm reading, I printed it up. I'm like reading this article. And guess what? It turns out that white liberals, when they talk to Blacks and Hispanics, they dumb down their vocabulary, and white conservatives don't do that. And it's called presenting lower competence. And I remember looking at that and thinking, first of all, immediately recognizing everybody that I knew. And I remember thinking to myself, and we call them the racist. This is the most racist thing you can do. You see somebody has like darker skin color than you and immediately assume they need to be protected from your vocabulary. It's an insane, but of course it's totally true that white liberals do that. And I had this moment where I realized like, this is not just an indictment of character. This is an indictment of the entire platform that the Democratic Party is built on. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to lose all of my friends. And I did. But I took that. I wasn't ready to deal with it. I was like, this is so like earth shattering. Like my life is about to end. I put it in a drawer. I closed the drawer and I said, I'll be back in 3 months. I'm not ready to deal with what this means for me. But I just remember so clearly the feeling of like the scales just dropping from my eyes and like seeing an indictment of myself and my entire milieu and like immediately recognizing the truth of it. And that our like accusation of the right was a confession. Like that was that moment where I was like, oh my God. So that was the first of many cracks, but like a very powerful one.
No, that's awesome. Thank you.
Paul, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. Very grateful
Hey, Mark.
to you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You unmute again. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. I just real quick, I want to say I have a really good one for Dan if you ever see me in the mornings. A really good question.
Okay. Look forward to it. Come on back. Thank you for
All right,
joining.
thanks.
Grateful
All
to
right,
you.
bye.
All right. We're going to try to sneak one more person in, even though I don't want to run over tonight for a variety of reasons. Niv, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are after you unmute. What's on your mind, please? Well,
Nick, you're on mute.
don't turn your camera off. Hit unmute one more time. No, you're still muted.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir. All good, Niv.
Okay,
Thank you
yeah.
for joining.
Yeah. Hi, I'm from Ithaca, New York. So we're talking about the Signal chat, but it's about how it got leaked. But I wanted to ask was more substantive. Waltz in the chat confirmed that they bombed a building because they saw the target go into his girlfriend's building. Are we just bombing people where they have their innocent family members around? Or if the building was an apartment, are we just bombing innocent people? And don't they need congressional approval for bombing the Houthis? Because they're not really an emergency to America's interest in that sense, right? Only 3% of trade goes through there. So why are we bombing somebody without congressional approval?
Those are two great questions. I'll give you a brief answer, then we'll go around the horn. And everyone can comment if they wish. The United States kills a lot of people. It doesn't get much coverage, but we kill a lot of people. So, I mean, we kill a lot of people in Iraq. Yeah, killed a lot of people whenever we use force. So it happens. And in terms of war powers, Congress for 3 or 4 decades has ceded the war powers to the presidency. Presidents of both parties feel free, because Congress doesn't stand up to them, to engage in military action that's not, as you said, an emergency without congressional authorization. It's certainly different than the people who passed the War Powers Act in the 70s intended it to be, in terms of the balance between the executive and the so-called co-equal branch of Congress. But this action, you can choose something from every one of our last 5 presidents. They've all done stuff like this. And it's you can't say this is worse because they've all done it, because they all feel free to do it, because Congress has no capacity to exercise its powers under the War Powers Act and under the Constitution. Adam.
I just want to say that I did vote for Trump and I still support him. So I'm not a Trump hater or anything along those lines.
Understood. Adam.
I am a Trump hater, and I still think that it probably fell within the purview of the executive branch to bomb Houthis when they're interrupting trade, right? So I mean, that's one thing I was like probably okay to do. And yeah, what Mark said about the past 5 presidents doing the same thing.
Batya.
Blocking a trade route has been considered casus belli, a just cause for a war for, I don't know, as long as we've been recording these things. I wouldn't take it at, just because JD Vance said only 3% of our trade is going through there, I wouldn't take that as true. First of all, we've been moving a lot of our trade around that route because the Houthis are shooting there, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is even Mike Walls was disputing his numbers. But if it's only 3%, it's still casus belli. But I think that's a really good question, even. I think that's a really important question to keep asking about these kinds of events and not just accepting them because they happen. So great question.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Teresa.
Yeah, I mean, as someone, so military, in my opinion, should, is there as a deterrent to war, at least having been in the family business, so to speak. And what I would say is civilian life, it's an unfortunate part of taking care of business. And it's awful and it's sad. And you're right to ask that question because we should always minimize innocent civilian casualties as much as possible. But what I would say on this one, based on the years of terror on the ocean that they have caused and blocking trade and things that they've done, we just did the world a big favor.
But the trade is still blocked. They just shot yesterday at commercial ships. So
yeah, Niv, I'll have to say, and just put an exclamation point on your question. And again, thank you for coming and asking it. You're the first person I've heard raise either of those two issues. I thought about them both, but I think about both those things quite a lot. And I didn't hear any Democrat in Congress raise them. Maybe somebody did. I didn't hear it discussed in the press. I mean, every time a president uses the military like this, not just killing civilians but using the war power without congressional authorization, there should be a robust national debate about whether this was, as all three of the guests tonight basically said, well, this is okay. This one was okay for him to do it without congressional authorization. But in my view, the bar should be quite high. And the question should be at least asked, was this an appropriate time where the president had to do it? Remember, one of the things they discussed on the Signal chat was, well, we could do this in a month. Well, if they could do it in a month, if they do it in a month, they had time to go to Congress for an authorization. And there's no way they would have, because President Trump is the inheritor of the precedent set by Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, Trump himself and Biden. Trump won. That presidents don't even think that, they don't even ponder, well, we should go to Congress for an authorization on this. They don't even ponder it because they don't have to, because they'd rather be unfettered. And Congress is so feckless and such a weak protector of its prerogatives that they just let it happen. Thank you for coming on. We hope you'll come back.
Thank you.
I think we had 3 new people tonight without my threatening to cancel the show, which is good. Thanks to Adam and Batya for coming back. And Theresa, thank you for being on. I hope you'll come back regularly.
Yes, I hope you'll invite me back.
Love having you on. We got 2 more regularly scheduled two-ways this week. One tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Dan, Sean, and I, the morning meeting. Adam never misses it unless he's working on memes. Adam, I need to spend like an hour with you one afternoon where you can teach me how to put memes online. I don't really even understand what that is. And then you're supposed to laugh at that.
Yeah. I can get you on TikTok.
Okay. And then tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern time, to close out the week, Friday, I'll be back for another two-way tonight. I'm sure we have something outstanding booked. I want to tell you about one other thing coming up, assuming I'm right that we have a graphic for this. Do we have a graphic for the book?
Yes,
All right.
we do.
So coming up, I'm going to have to wait for the graphic to come up to tell you when it is, because I don't remember, but I think it's like April 16th or something. A new book
April
out.
1st at 6.
April 1st. All right, that's sooner than I thought. April 1st on this program, a new book called Who Believed in You by my friend, Dina Powell, who happens to be married to Dave McCormick, senator from Pennsylvania. They've co-authored a book that they worked on during COVID about people who supported other people and have played a critical role in their lives. It's a great book, and they're going to be here, not only themselves, Dina Powell McCormick and Dave McCormick, but some of the people, including some prominent people who they interviewed for the book. It's going to be an incredibly special episode of this program, and I'm really looking forward to it. And mark it down in your calendars if in case you're inclined to ever skip the program. That's this Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern time, right here, as they say on television, on Two-Way. Thanks to our guests. Thanks to our questioners. Thanks to the producers. Thank you to the people at Matilda here in London, which I just saw and loved. See everybody tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time on Two-Way.